it's a story about a group of people who seek to build a new society in which equality would no longer be a trendy value, but would become the highest law. The dreams are about society where your gender, your sexuality, your ethnicity, your nationality, your economical or social status would no longer matter. But it will be enough to be a human being, to have all the rights and opportunities as those who are around you. So the groups of those dreamers are this infamous group, Femens, and here I am, one of them in front of you. My story started in Ukraine, as it was already said, the country that in fact was born and became an independent the year I was born. So if you want, I feel like I was going up to... when I was born in 1990s, after collapse of USSR, in Ukraine states didn't have established government institutions that gave a lot of space for developing of black market, corruption, prostitution, and many other forms of exploitation. There was a desperate poverty, unemployment. We didn't have national currency. We didn't have money in the country. We had coupons, sort of papers that people were receiving for their job. We had electricity and light by hours. People are calling, the public are calling those years rough 90s. For me, it was just my normal childhood, and I didn't know that childhood could be different. So being a little child, I dreamed about the very normal things, probably like you all dreamed. I dreamed about having a lot of toys, having a lot of chocolates and sweets, and that my older sister would not have access to them. I dreamed that the boy that I like would like me as well. But I also dreamed about other things. I dreamed that my mother would not have to work double time more than my father and earn double less salary. When I grew up a bit older, I remember that I formed this clear dream that I wanted everyone to have the same amount of food, same amount of money, same amount of toys, chocolates, and work. I formed that dream, and at that moment I remember that this clear identification, clear interpretation of need of equality came in my head. I was a very little child. When I grew up and I was a teenager, at that moment we relatively already had food and relatively some money, and we could have toys and chocolates. But I understood at that moment that something was missed in the list of in my dream list. I understood that something very fundamental was missing in that list. Because I looked around and I saw that people were discussing in their houses something that they couldn't discuss outside. I remember how at every election we had a conversation at home between my parents, who were their bosses or the heads of the institutions where they worked, would control their vote, would basically check who they vote for. And this was a fear of everyone. I remember how I was listening on TV and the radio that the journalists who choose to speak, to say what they think, but not what the government wants them to say, were disappearing. Like, for example, Georgi Gongadze, who was very critical to that time actual president, Leonid Kuchma, he disappeared, and a few years later, his head was found in a forest, and then the personal security of a president, ex-security of that president, revealed the records with conversations of the president and the ministers about ordering a death of that journalist, ordering a killing of that journalist, actually. So I was growing up in this kind of backgrounds, and I remember myself being 14 years old, I didn't think in this primitive childish dream, I didn't think about something very fundamental that could replace money, food, toys, and chocolates and everything. I didn't think about freedom, about the need of freedom, about something very sacred, as we all say, about this very primitive today word freedom that we didn't have around us. We all had the bitter taste of having no freedom, of living in not free society. And when I was 14, I observed the revolution that happened in my country. It was a revolution for freedom. It was 2004, Orange Revolution happened in Ukraine. It was a moment when a desperate Ukrainian nation, colored in orange colors, went outside and occupied the streets with new values that they dreamed about, such as democracy and freedom of speech. We heard those words everywhere. They were new words for us. It was 2004, and we heard them everywhere. That was a very inspiring moment. The moment where we, new generation like me, people and children like me, being teenager, we understood something new, that it's not about having money, food, and chocolates and toys. It's about something bigger that we want in life. And I remember the moment after the revolution, this big inspiration was immediately erased. People were deceived by a lack of a quick and fundamental changes, and ended up choosing a new dictator, Yanukovych, who became a president and brought the country back into a state of a country with a high level of corruption, discrimination, and new forms of oppression. The people were deceived after the revolution because they were expecting that someone else will make the changes. And there was no one who came to make those changes. And they gave up their values and their ideas that they believed in 2004 during the revolution. I remember that I was studying journalism and have been a student like you, and I decided myself to become a journalist. I decided to choose this profession, believing that maybe through my profession, in my very little life, I can exercise those very beautiful values as democracy, that I can practice them in my own life. Once I tried, I was forced to do like everyone else. I had to write, I was working in a press office of Kyiv City Administration. I had to write articles celebrating the activity and the work of the city mayor and the government. I had to lie about their activity, as many other journalists had to do that. I understood I had no choice, and I looked around and I saw a very desperate, disappointed nation. I saw how millions had given up something that was so inspiring. At that moment, I looked around and I knew that our dream of democracy was kidnapped. It disappeared. It was not there anymore. But I remember that I felt very clearly, I knew very clearly that it was no one else's fault but our fault. And I felt guilty as well. I knew that it was our fault because we didn't care enough about the values and the dreams that we had during the Orange Revolution particularly and after. I knew that we expected someone to make the changes, but didn't take responsibility on ourselves to make the changes. So this is a story that I told you that I lived, the story that taught me something very fundamental in life that I want to share with you. I understood that changes can't be just our dreams. It's not enough. To make changes is our duty, is the duty of everyone, of each and everyone. Change will not come if we wait for someone else or for another time. We are the ones, and as Toni Morrison said, the American writer Toni Morrison, she says, you are the best thing you have. And this is what I want you to understand as well. If you wait for someone else to make changes, I want to disappoint you that you're totally wrong. All that time you have been waiting only for yourself. Understanding that in age of you, in your age actually, I had this clear feeling that if not us, then who else? This very classical saying. And that was the moment when the moment comes when you have to make a decision and take a stand and do something, because you feel that everywhere you look around and you don't see anyone who you would like to become or whose life you would like to live. Can you imagine living in a society where your dreams about becoming someone are just not real, where you can't see anyone who could represent you or who you would like to become? So that was a moment when I joined Femens movement, this infamous the movement that we discussed today. So our mission is to spot out the problems, to put the light on what is ignored or hidden on purpose. We believe that our duty is to be the voices that break taboos created by the system, and to speak out about the problems. Because speaking out about the problems is already a first step in solving them out. Actually, it's a first step in making changes. We started our fight as a female group in Ukraine against prostitution and sex tourism, as we believe that this is the biggest illness in the society that is eating and destroying destinies of millions of women. We saw how our friends and some of Femens members at some point had to go to brothels to be able to pay for their studies in university, to be able to study like you. We started the fight organizing big demonstrations, marches. We were 80 women, 100 women, that is quite a lot for Ukraine. And we were wearing pink clothes and carrying pink balloons and flags, believing that pink color could attract attention to our messages. And of course, we were wrong, because we realized, we opened our eyes and we saw a very apolitical, a very ignorant society, particularly ignorant towards us as women, as well as towards women's issues. At that moment, we understood that, well, the truth is that not many like to listen to women, not many like to talk to them, but nearly everyone likes to look at them. That is a brutal reality. You can argue, but I will keep arguing that this is the reality. And this is something that this brutal reality forced us to create our ideology and Femen tactic. So Femen ideology is an absolute, is a quest for an ideal society, freed from a gendered conception of human relationship, in which one could consider himself as equal to any individual. We seek to overcome individual issues and cultural, national, and religious specificities. We seek emancipation of men and women from the sexist mold that is imposed upon them by society. We proclaim human indivisibility. Femen is a feminist movement, therefore humanist, taking part in the fight against the exploitation of one group by another. And yes, we do place women's liberation and women's questions in the heart of our fight. But as you can probably, those who follow or those who see, you can probably notice that we do not stop only on those issues. We go beyond them. We also oppose fascism, homophobia, and other forms of oppression, because we believe that being representatives of one of the most oppressed parts of society, that are women, we have a duty to oppose all forms of oppression. We believe that those who are enslaved the most will unslave the whole society, will actually have a duty, have a mission to enslave themselves and try to help the whole society. So we oppose all forms of oppression in order to keep traveling the path of this utopia that is our idea and ideology. But in order to reach our ideal of the society, our ideal of equality, we know that it can be achieved through a total paradigm shift. We know that a radical break with the dominant patriarchal ideology is needed. And we break radically with patriarchy through our protest, through our tactic. That is called sextremism, as probably some of you heard. Sextremism is a protest tactic of feminine movement, is a tactic that is that has a philosophy of a rebellious woman's body, a body that is no longer passive, but active, a body that you all used to see on the big billboards selling whether yogurt, beer, or Ferrari car. This body is taking out from this billboard, taking out from this exploitation context of this, taking out from this sexist and sexual context, and becomes a political instrument. And this body is today in the middle of political context. Very important. We don't disturb you to work. You can work. This is the philosophy of sextremism. We understood that women's body is always in the heart of women's oppression. For example, sex industry oppresses women by grabbing women's body and transforming them into a tool with which you can please or you can enrich someone. For example, religious institutions are very much concerned around, of women's body because they want to impose the oppressive rules, such as forbid abortion or promoting this role of a woman being a mother. And we know that a woman's body was always and remains one of the central points of women's oppression. This is why we understood that we have to take the woman's body and to put it in the middle of women's liberation. We should not hide our body that is hidden and have been hidden through centuries by many institutions and also by ourselves. We understood that we have to expose it. We have to expose it in a very different context, not the patriarchal context, but the feminist context. And this is what Femen does. Again, we take away the body from the woman's body from a sexual context and put it in a political one. Our bodies are serving a special mission, our mission, political mission. Our bodies are our posters. This is where we write our manifestos. This is where we write our messages and our demands. So we, of course, to create this tactic, probably I should claim that we were not ready at the beginning for inventing anything like this. I couldn't even imagine that I would join a movement that one day will be these famous topless girls. And I couldn't imagine that me myself will have to do it. I couldn't imagine, and this is why I have been one of those people who have been the biggest and the loudest opposition to the idea of topless within the movement. When the idea came up, some of us opposed the idea, and including myself. I remember thinking that my argument was that simple argument, that how can you oppose sexual exploitation of women being naked? How can you? Isn't it stupid? Isn't it counterproductive? Isn't it a paradox? And then I understood that the paradox was my way of thinking. Because in my way of thinking I had the only definition of woman's body, of woman's naked body. And the definition was, again, the one that the patriarchal culture gave me. The definition that you can be naked only in a very intimate situations, or in brothels, or being a prostitute, or a street dancer, or so on. And I understood that the paradox was in my mind. And that paradox was planted by the vision of society of women's body. So, of course, I've been convinced by watching how the protests were working. And the first time I did the protest, I should confess again. I do too many confessions today, but I like you too much. I should confess that the first time I did that protest, I didn't feel naked. I didn't feel naked because I knew that I'm out of the sexual context. I'm in the middle of the square. On my body was written a slogan celebrating the independence of Ukraine, as it was an independent day of Ukraine. I remember that I didn't feel naked and I didn't feel shy, even though maybe you wouldn't believe, and you will not believe, I'm a very shy person. So that was the creation of our tactic, but we did a lot of mistakes, and I will always recognize it. And we did those mistakes because we were creating everything by ourselves. I should say that you're very lucky. Charlene told me that you gender and politics, right? That will come. So you're very lucky, and you should attend it. I do a promotion, and but. Me studying in university, I was studying in the best university of Ukraine, and I studied journalism, something, being a professional, you're supposed to know about a lot of things, and particularly such important things as feminism. But in 5 years of my studies, I never had any lecture, even one lecture on feminism. It was very hard for us to start a feminist movement in a very patriarchal context, in a very sexist country, let's be honest. It was very hard for us also by ourselves to feel connected to feminism, as we didn't know enough. And while we were creating, while we were trying, we did many mistakes. For example, when we decided to do topless actions, I remember that few protests that we did them topless, but the slogans were written on our posters that we kept above our heads, and we didn't write on our body. And then we saw how some media, sexist media, were cropping the photo. So basically cutting the poster that we kept above our head and keeping only the photo, the image of bare-breasted women, and signing it with something. And we understood that we have been trapped, that patriarchal culture is keep trying to kill, to destroy this women's rebellion. And this is how we decided to write slogans and messages on our bodies so they cannot erase them, so they cannot cut them or crop them. We rethink our ideology and our tactic permanently all the time, because I think that people who cannot change their minds cannot change the world as well. So we keep changing our minds, and we keep recognizing that some things were done maybe not perfectly or not well enough, and we keep trying and changing the tactic. I should say that we identify in our ideology for ourselves, we identify 3 main targets that we follow in each action that Femens does. The targets are dictatorship, sex industry, and religious institutions. Those 3 targets for us are the main manifestations of patriarchy, are the incarnations of patriarchal culture. Dictatorship, the political form with the male ideas of domination, of subordination. Sex industry, the industry that is, as we already discussed, that is destroying destinies of millions of women who are forced, I repeat, to join this business and become victims in order of survival, for the reasons of economical survival. And again, I should state clearly that we are not dogmatic as some media try to present us. We do not say that every prostitute is the oppressed one. We are not fighting with the prostitutes. We are fighting against the idea of women selling their body, or of someone buying woman's body. We believe this is a cause of inequality in society, and we believe that such a phenomenon cannot exist in a society that is moving in the path of democracy, equality, and human rights. Therefore, we are in favor of criminalization of client, of prostitute, in order to destroy the philosophy, if we can call it with such a beautiful word, the philosophy of someone buying someone's body, of someone buying another human being even if it's for an hour or half an hour or 15 minutes. And the third target is the religious institutions. And I think you're all very familiar with this because Femens often opens the debates about it. And of course, one of the anti-religious protests of Femens that we did in Ukraine, in Kiev, is the reason of why I had to leave the country and had to ask for political asylum in France. We do oppose all monotheistic religions on the equal level. For us, religion, as Mariam Namazi, Iranian-born activist and campaigner in UK, states that she believes that religion should come in a package as cigarettes. Religion kills. And we believe that religious institutions are the source of the oppression historically and today, particularly the oppression of women. Some of you can say, well, but this is, I mean, we are right now in a time of secularism and everything is fine. Well, maybe there is a problem with Islam, but others, Catholicism is not really active anymore. I want to disagree with you and to oppose you very strongly, because I think that sometimes we don't realize that religious institutions sneak very, very professionally and go very deep into political institutions, into a governmental mechanism, and keep imposing their rules. Just remind you that one of the European so-called democratic countries, Spain, just the last year there was a huge fight for a very fundamental right of women to abort, where the government, together with Catholic institutions, tried to forbid the abortion. In fact, they did forbid, it was 9th of September, they adopted the first step of restriction of abortion for minors. And of course, they do prepare to continue to go till the end. So sometimes maybe there are the illusions that it's not an issue, but it is an issue, and we do believe that opposing religious institutions and the imposition of their rules and their morals on society is one of the biggest duty of everyone, believers and non-believers. Again, the opposition against religious institutions is the opposition of religious institutions and religious morals being present in political and social life. It's not about you believing in something. Well, everyone has a freedom and right, fundamental right to believe in what you have, but you don't have right to tell what my children have to do, how I have to dress, what I have to do with my body. Nobody has a right for that. And this is why I believe that we have to oppose it. And, Christopher Hitchens said it very beautifully. Religion poisons everything. And this is basically what I believe in. Again, growing up in a religious family and in a traditionally religious society. And we believe that this is one of the fundamental questions of feminist fight and women's fight. And this is why Femens states this fight very loud and proud, because we also see a certain level of fear to criticize religions in order not to touch feelings of someone. And I want to stop a little bit on this point about touching feelings of someone, because people would say, yeah, of course, we are all for criticizing religion, but maybe not in this way because it can offend some believers or others. Well, there is no such a thing as a right not to be offended. And this, someone should state it clearly. I'm offended as a feminist every day by so many sexist comments. I'm offended every day by religious institutions. I'm offended every day by some infamous speakers as, well, let's not quote them here. Let's not give them a kind of a fame. So yeah, I'm offended every day, but I can't complain. What I can do is I can oppose their ideas, and this is what we do. And this is our right. And at the end, religions are the ideas among many other ideas, and we should be able to criticize them. We should be able to speak about them, to laugh at them, to ridicule them, maybe to aggress them. It's a right. It's a right of everyone, for the fundamental right of freedom of speech. So our movement, following those three points that we address in each protest, in each action, being born in Ukraine, being for a while, well, for 4 years, we have been a national group that have been known around the world, but then suddenly we became an international movement that we represent today with 10 branches across the world, across the globe. This internationalization happened by a call of women from different countries who said, we want to start it in our country. Being in Ukraine, we didn't even think that one day Femens could become an international movement. We were concerned of our national issues and couldn't imagine that we can address other issues as well. We didn't go beyond the borders of Ukraine or Eastern Europe. But then we had a call of women, Brazilian, French, German, Spanish, who were addressing their question from their countries, and were believing that the tactic of Femens would be useful for them. This is how the Femens became an international movement. Our activity could be described as saying the unsayable, or rather screaming the unsayable, probably it will be more relevant. As moreover, we know how it feels to be judged and severely punished for saying the unsayable. I believe that in our modern world, there is a certain illness, and this is also something that I would talk about, the Central Europe. There is a hysteria of tolerance and political correctness that we all suffer of. The society is in a permanent demand for this political correctness and tolerance, and under which there is a certain limitation of human freedom, and helping people in power. This is something that helping people in power to hide many of the system's source. And with Femens topless protest, we succeed to frighten many patriarchal institutions by taking away women's naked body from the shining world of advertisement or sex industry and putting it in a political pit, where women's body is no longer serving anyone's interest but women's interest. But we believe that for kind of taking this mission on us and saying something that was not said, taking on us the mission to say unsayable, we believe that the world will welcome us and will say, thank you, girls, we're with you. But we were wrong, of course. We understood, we saw how the world preferred to twist our messages and our ideas in order not to face the problems. Let's be honest, nobody likes to talk about problems. And moreover, I realized that people like it even less when someone else is talking about their problems, because this is something that forces them to face them and to face the need to sort them out. When we started the Femens movement in Ukraine, as I said, we were very young girls and experienced in activism, and I will be honest, without big knowledge of politics and medias. We learned a lot and created the movement tactic and ideology and our own feminist media machine, if you want to call it like this, by surpassing many obstacles and judgments that we still go through today. We believe that the world would become, would support us in our fight, but we understood that they were not ready for that. And we have been the victims of many political and media manipulations that still, again, are going on today on a very different level, on a much higher level, that is very hard to resist being a group of volunteers. Well, with Femens, we denounced Ukraine's bloodthirsty sex industry, but for that we have been called prostitutes in our country. We denounced the dictatorial regime in Belarus, staging their protest, but us ourselves, we have been tortured and nearly killed in the Belarusian forest by the security service that was serving this dictatorship. We denounced we decided by ourselves to tell our own story to the world, how the patriarchal culture, to show how the patriarchal culture was deep inside us and deep inside the society that we lived in. And we told a story about a man who tried to grab the movement at the moment when the movement was becoming famous. We told this story in front of the cameras. We decided to do it by ourselves, and maybe some of you heard about this documentary that came out about Femen movement, and the euphoria in media after that Femen have been created by a man, and for this confession that we believed could maybe serve some women who also are victims of such stories. We believe that this can help, and decided to confess. And for this confession, we had to pay a high price because we have been called puppets and not real feminists. Or, for example, addressing and defending the release of a young Tunisian girl, Amina, who decided to take a topless photo of herself with a slogan in support of Femen and denouncing the problems of her culture. She had been jailed and imprisoned for this topless protest and for the tagging word Femen in the public place. We have been accused for talking for a culture that we don't know. We have been accused for being white Western feminists who try to impose their rules on Muslim women. We have been accused for speaking instead of Muslim women and trying to liberate them. This was this hot story made up very professionally by journalists to create a debate, totally ignoring the fact that it was actually a Tunisian woman, a woman who was born and grew up in Muslim country and in Muslim family, who have denounced those issues and who took a stand herself to take a photo of herself topless and write the slogan on her body. So I'm saying all of that saying unsayable remains a forbidden thing in our society. I will quote Coco Chanel here, I'm sorry, but she said that speaking out loud your ideas remains one of the most courageous things, and it is so today. So I told you all those examples of how feminist ideas have been twisted or turned or manipulated to show you that all that was, in my point of view, all that was said because of this hysteria of political correctness and tolerance that we have in our society. Because people don't want to accept the messages, the direct messages that are told straight to them. But it's easier to make up the provocative story out of it. So I want to warn you that political correctness and tolerance, well, maybe it's not the place for that, because here you're learning a sort of diplomacy and how to become a politician, and maybe here my speech is becoming a very provocative. Sorry, administration, and if there are some professors, but I honestly advise you to reject this big call that we hear, especially from authorities, in being tolerant and politically correct. Political correctness is a disease of today's Western society, and we have to oppose it. Femen does it very actively, as you might notice, and political correctness is a sort of a hidden dictatorship. And Charlton Heston said it as nobody could say better. He said, political correctness is a tyranny with good manners. Manipulation with morality and respect are often, we often hear those manipulations in order to advise us to be politically correct, but political correctness and tolerance, it doesn't serve anything to a cause of settling morality and respect in society. It serves the only one mission: to shut us up. So I call you all not to fall into self-censorship, not to deny for yourself the right and the need and the duty to speak out. And don't judge others for speaking out like Femen does. It is by revealing the truth, we are spelling out our messages and having debates, creating those debates about a very fundamental, important, and maybe sometimes difficult questions, we can change the world without permission. So what Femen did change of course, some of you ask, so what Femens did reach? As I told you, our mission and our duty is to spot out those problems, to put them out, to throw them to society, and to let them be discussed. The questions and the problems that are hidden on purpose sometimes by the regimes, institutions, or authorities, or the problems that society doesn't want to face. So, starting the activity in Ukraine, we have been the only movement in Ukraine that was denouncing dictatorship of Yanukovych. I will remind you that probably all of you were following the debates and are following the situation in Ukraine. And 1 year ago, you know that there was another revolution where people again, being desperate and disappointed before, again stood up because they couldn't breathe anymore. And I will remind you that it is 3 years ago that Femens started to do those protests. We were the alarms in the society about what was coming, because after our protest, we felt the dictatorship, we felt the regime on ourselves, but through persecutions, arrests, being followed 24 hours by secret services, living with secret services actually, being beaten up for no reason, just like this in the street, understanding that it is a message from a government, and being forced at the end to leave the country, to run away, to be able to continue. So that was our mission in Ukraine. We also we were the first movement that has denounced internationally the secret, the secret business of authorities and politicians and big institutions in Ukraine, that is a sex industry. Sex industry, in fact, by law, is forbidden in Ukraine. It is officially forbidden. Prostitution is forbidden. It seems like by law that there is no brothel in Ukraine. But at the end, Ukraine is one of the most famous country, a paradise for sex tourists and for a paradise of prostitution for some. So that was our mission, to put it out, to let the world know about it, as we were living it by ourselves. We were the ones who, the last year, appearing at the Congress of Spain, screamed out loud, "Abortion is sacred," in front of the Minister Galardon, who was the initiator of the law to forbid abortion. That was hidden. It was not discussed in press. It's popped up in some very little media, local media, but it wasn't discussed in press. And by doing this action, we sparkled the debates, we sparkled the opposition of feminists and other movements to this law. And we believe that was we contributed to the result that the law was blocked and didn't pass away. I want to tell you that, of course, in France, probably you remember, as it is quite fresh, it is feminine activists who interrupted Marine Le Pen's speech on the 1st of May, and who again reminded maybe to French society who is this leader and what kind of ideas this party really represents. You could see it live on your TV, how violent they were, how immediately the crowd was screaming racist comments towards one of the activists on the balcony who was in their opposition. We believe that we served a special sort of a mission to show the real faces of those who wear the masks on them, particularly like Marine Le Pen. Well, I can continue saying some, going through the list of some results that we believe are important results for us. But the fundamental thing also, I should say, that we believe that it is in fact a result for us. We know that, first of all, for Ukraine, we did created such a notion as a Ukrainian feminist that never existed before, and we're quite proud of it. And we do believe that we do serve a big historical of all feminists. We contribute to this goal by again illustrating to the whole world, spamming with all those pictures of topless women who are not posing and who are not smiling and who are not telling buy me or buy what I'm proposing here to you, but who are spelling out political ideas. As I told you that we did face some harsh reactions on our actions, such as one in Belarus, and the experiences in Belarus were one of the most horrible experiences one could imagine. So the 3 topless feminine activists, including myself, appeared at the main square in Minsk with the ironical look copying dictator Lukashenko and writing slogans on our bodies and our posters against opposing the dictatorship of Lukashenko, that is, the regime is already existing for 24 years, and in support of political prisoners, the journalists and activists who are disappearing, as it was happening in Ukraine not so long time ago. We appeared at the square and left, and a few hours after we have been kidnapped, taken to the forest. For 24 hours we have been questioned and tortured in the forest, psychologically and physically. And I remember when, well, there was a question whether we will survive or not, because every 10 minutes we heard the voice of a man that we couldn't see, as our faces were hidden with hats and we couldn't move. We heard the voice of a person who was saying how they will kill us, why they will kill us, and when they will kill us. And I remember coming back to Kiev, I felt, well, of course I felt something that I can't describe, but there was a reflection of what did it serve to? So what we suffered such a horrible experience that I wish nobody ever would suffer. And what did it serve? What did we serve? Whose interest we served? Could we contribute to a cause of a fight for freedom in Belarus? And all these reflections were coming and popping up in my head. And a few years after, just a year ago actually, I have been in a ceremony where the activists have been 10 activists have been selected by Amnesty International. They got kind of prizes, and I was one of the nominees. And among those activists, there was one Belarusian person, but they didn't tell me who was that. And when there was a ceremony, I saw Andrei Sannikov, the candidate for president in Belarus in 2010, who have been jailed just for being a candidate, just for trying to oppose Lukashenko, and he was in a very high level. He had a chance to become a new president. He had been jailed, and the moment when we did an action in Belarus, he was in jail. And at this ceremony, he took a microphone and he started to talk, and he said, "I'm so proud to be here, but not because I'm receiving this prize, but because finally I have an opportunity to say thank you to one person." He said that when we did a protest in Belarus, that the information about this protest, as I'm quoting it, he said it ate the walls of the jail. Everybody in the jail, in the rooms, they were all political activists with him. Everybody was celebrating, dancing, and screaming the slogans that were written on our bodies. For them, it was a moment of hope. And it was only a few years after, I remember myself understanding how important was that protest, and understanding that I don't regret any second of that torture that we went through because of this revelation of one of the activists and candidate for president in Belarus. So I just want to say that we keep fighting, and we believe that we can change the world, but we see sometimes a sort of kind of ignorance, or maybe a disappointment of some, like people who could disappoint us by their ignorance or the level of illusions they live with. They live with illusions that it's not needed. Well, maybe it's needed in Belarus or in Ukraine, but it's not needed here. I just want to remind you and to warn you, you know that nearly 50%, nearly half of French population doesn't go to vote. It's not just like this. It's not just an accident. It is something that is revealing something about this French society. And I want to warn you that using this opportunity, extreme right-wing party that, as French people tell me, have never been popular, is becoming very popular. So something that maybe seemed to you not possible yesterday can be very much possible tomorrow. And I want to warn you, please stand up, please take care. Another contemporary example of why such a fight and the attempt, if you want, to rebuild the world is so much needed in countries like yours is, of course, an example of the story that, the Charlie Hebdo attack and the deaths of amazing people, one of the best people I met in France. And society lost one of the most progressive minds and open brains and minds and visions, lost it because of, I believe, also because of this hysteria of political correctness and tolerancy that is so much and so often demanded by the society. Because I believe if there would be more people like Charlie Hebdo, if there would be more people who would draw such drawings and it would become normal, they wouldn't be spotted out. They wouldn't be seen in the crowd as a different point. They wouldn't be killed then. We wouldn't have to suffer and cry after them. If there would be more activists like Femens, it doesn't mean to be topless, don't be scared. But activists like Femens speaking out directly, the question, addressing the problems in your own manner, probably the society will move forward. I'm really convinced about this. And I remember I share with you again so many confessions and horrible experiences, but we will come to a positive point in this speech. But the last very negative, positive experience, the terrorist attack in Copenhagen that have happened 1 month after Charlie Hebdo attack, and I have been present at that attack, and I was the one who was speaking, just like in front of you right now, was speaking at this conference, and I was talking about freedom of speech, and at that moment I heard behind the door the shots of Kalashnikov. I heard them very sharply. I knew it was a gun. So my speech was interrupted by a gun, by a person who was moved by dogmas, a person who was opposed to the ideas of fundamental human rights that we defend, a person who didn't want to hear a critic of his opinion or couldn't accept that his opinion could be criticized. And I remember that moment that when I heard the shots and not many people reacted in the room, and then at some point everybody started to run, and I remember just like here there was a back door, and I ran out through the back door and hid myself under a car, still hearing a gunshot. At that moment, maybe it's very bizarre, but this is what happened. At that moment, I thought about this argument that people say very often, but you go too far. You don't have to be too aggressive. You don't have to be too provocative. You go too far. And at that moment, again, hearing the shots of Kalashnikov, I asked myself, and now I want to ask you all, is it really us who go too far? Is it really taking off your top, writing a slogan on your body, and addressing women's issues that are so important today? Is it really going too far? At the end, this is the only thing what Femens does. The rest, the reaction that comes after our action is not Femens' act. Is a reaction of a society, of an institution, of personalities on our action. It's not us. So is it really going too far doing such a protest? Is it really so offensive, more offensive than someone willing to kill another person for not agreeing with him or her? We don't take guns in our hands to prove that we are right. We're quite confident in our ideas, and I prefer to have such meetings like here with you today. And the only thing what we do, we defend a human dignity. And I want to tell you that about this thing going too far. I want to make clear that we do believe, and this is why without permission, we do believe that each of us has a moral responsibility to disobey the laws that are unjust. Same as we all have responsibility to obey the laws that are just. But we have to disobey the laws that are oppressive, that are unjust towards us, such as law in Morocco that is jailing, that requires a jail for gay people, for example. So we believe that we can change the world, and the fact that we believe in it raises our chances to actually succeed. And with our protest, we want to at least attempt to make changes, because already attempt is already a big change. It is a change of ignorance, it is a change of apoliticness of one or another. And I want to ask you all, whether you agree with Femens or not, whether you like Femens or not, whether you agree with what I said or not, just forget everything. I want to ask you one thing, like me, very personally. I want to ask you, don't believe anyone who tells you that you can't make changes, who tells you that you can't change the world. Don't believe anyone, and please don't doubt the people who want to change the world. Don't doubt. We don't have, instead of being divided, we have to be united. With our different opinions, different tactics, and different preferences, we have to be united. Because what we are serving, what we have to serve a human cause. We have to serve a cause of equality. That should be kind of a priority to all of us. And again, about the change, that probably maybe this title and this word that I say, change the world, sounds maybe too lyrical and too like floppy or too, romantic. But at the end, the people who are crazy enough to think that they can change the world are the ones who do it. They are the ones. And I really believe that you can make changes. Please believe in us. And I want to say that maybe tomorrow already we will meet in the street with posters above our heads. We will be told, please, you will not. Doesn't matter. But maybe we will reunite and do something together. And maybe a few years after, we will sit around a big table and discuss how we're going to make better this new rebuilt world that we built together, during this moment. And if you believe me, I really appreciate it. If you don't, if you're laughing, I just want to warn you that maybe one day you will be crying and regretting it. Thank you. Only now we're supposed to start. Your questions only now that we start.
Thank you very much, Nina, for this really good speech. Now we will go into questions. So if you have questions, you can raise your hand and get on to the same part.
Hi, thank you for your beautiful speech, and I'm very impressed because we have only 2 years of difference, and you have done a lot of things, and I'm only a student. So I have a question about the feminism, because I see the feminism as a fight for women's rights to have a social equality between the men and the women. So why, after all these years, there is a man who fight to show that feminism is not only a woman fight. There is a lot of men in our generation who want to fight with women for the women's rights. So why there is no man in the movement?
Yeah. Merci Mathieu.
thank you for the question, and don't worry, you can do a lot in 3 years. Okay, you can do more. Well, about absence, there seems to be an absence of men in feminists. First of all, it's not true. We have members, male members, particularly in Femens France. We have many male members, men of very different age, coming from a very different social background, who are contributing to our fight by, I don't know, working on our press release or managing social networks, helping us in organizing the protests, helping us to sneak in to some places where we pretend like we were couples, so nobody thinks that but I can tell you that it's a clear choice that the protests of Femens are done by women because, well, first of all, I should say that, I'm sorry, but we believe that it's women's turn now. And second is that because of the tactic that Femens adopts and uses, let's agree that male body wouldn't have a meaning that woman's body has in a political context. And we do want to follow that tactic. And we choose, it's a clear choice that women are fighting, showing that it is a women now being united, not separated, not divided, having a clear tactic, a clear attitude, a clear idea, and clear behavior are acting together and opposing a male's world. To some, of course, philosophy could sound like, okay, but what about men? Well, we do believe that men are, of course, are feminists. And again, as I told you, that there are many men feminists in Femens. But we believe that there is a special, it's our time. We just want to do it by ourselves. That's it.
Hello, I'm I have the same question.
Sorry.
Yeah, also, I have another one. Something with controversy in this room, I think. What do you think about the so-called French GPA? I think in English it's surrogacy. Does it hurt the women's body, or what's your opinion about that? Do you denounce the monetization of the women's body with the porn industry? So what do you think about
that? About GPA, we, as Femens, we didn't. Being as a movement, we didn't do any protests regarding that yet, and didn't react with a protest. But it's from the beginning we did indicate our position from the beginning, starting from Ukraine, because in Ukraine, particularly, we have been observing the situation with surrogacy. They call it surrogacy motherhood. In Ukraine and in many other countries, particularly like in America and many other countries where surrogacy is accepted, there are many agencies. It's a business built as a sex industry. There are agencies where there is a administrator of an agency, kind of a pimp if you want, where you come as a woman to subscribe to say, I want to become a surrogate mother. The agency takes a % from each woman who does it, and the woman gets her own %. So the way the business that is settled, the way the business works is very similar to sex industry. And again, the woman's body is in the middle. Usage of women's bodies in the middle of this question. So, of course, obviously, Femens does oppose this idea. Femens does oppose this practicing, knowing and observing, being in the middle of observing how does it work and what is, and that this kind of explanations on surface that this could help the families and this could help the society, and with this kind of adapting this very beautiful language has nothing to do with the reality. And it's a usage of women's body. It's a usage of women's body as something that can serve again a patriarchal idea and patriarchal mission, and it's again a business that is molesting and destroying women's destinies. And I really hope this business, structured the way it's structured in Eastern Europe, the way it's really structured in America, would not arrive in France.
Good evening. Thanks for being here. I had a question about more, let's say, classical feminism. You just told us about your values, feminist values. Yet you're still seen, feminists still seen as an opponent to these movements. Why do you think it's so? And do you think you could collaborate with them?
Thank you. It's really important question, and maybe this is something I missed in the points that I wanted to talk with you about. But it's really important because there is this illusion that femin is that there is a big opposition between feminist and femin. First of all, it's totally not like this. And there is this always question: would you imagine to work with feminists? We do work with feminists. We do work, particularly in France. We are in very good relationship and connections with le féminisme, with les effrontés. We agree on many points, and we do collaborate together on some campaigns. Or, for example, we feel a very strong support from those movements in the question that is right now rising up in actuality for women. We are charged in France for sexual exhibitionism. The only country in the world that charged feminine activists for sexual exhibition, that is in fact a sexual aggression. That is also a mental disorder. And we're charged for this, for our political protest. And for example, we feel a very strong support of those movements that we really appreciate. And together, for example, with le féminisme, we did write together an opinions on prostitution, on criminalization of client. We did together demonstrations. We joined together demonstrations and marches. So probably there are, as I described already in my talk, that there are many illusions or twisted realities by media, by public, about feminine, about feminists in general, and the reality. So we do work with feminists, we do like to work with them, and we would like to work with them more.
Good evening, thank you for being here with us. I just have a short question. You say you use the female body in a political sphere, but the people who watch you in television are not in this political sphere. So how do you expect them to understand your fight when they're still in this patriarchal sphere?
It's a live microphone. The thing is that the people who are watching the TV and hearing about feminine actions, they're watching it in the news. Among of other news that President Hollande, send air army to Syria, and other very important events that Iran and America reached an agreement. And then they hear a feminine addressing a question of highlighting such an event as the Salon Musulman. So feminine, we are not, our actions are not streamed in a time after 12, when it's a erotic time or erotic, films are shown or something. We're streamed in a prime time in the news that is indicating the political meaning of those actions. And of course, if we would be on the covers of Playboy, probably, of course, I wouldn't oppose your opinion that how can we understand that this is a political when it's on the cover of Playboy. But when we are in I don't know, Libération, or we are on the news, it's clear that this is a political event, and this is the event that deserves attention. So we believe that we break the news, if you want. We jump with protest into television, so people who turn on the television to watch the news, to know what's going on in the world, what are the political events today. And here we are.
Hello. So thank you for coming. I'm feminist too, and I was in Russia, so I really know the context where you're coming from. And actually, I would like to talk about my own experience. Just when I was talking with friends that were feminists and that were not, about feminism in general and your movement, a lot of people told me, "Oh, I really hate this movement. It's really extremist." And lots of people told me this, and actually, you say, okay, the point of your cause is to kind of attract attention on some points, but I have a feeling when people look at this, they don't look at the cause you defend, they just think, oh, there were these crazy women entering the church and they were naked, and they don't look what you really defend. They just feel that it was not okay, and so that's like, if they were religious, for example, that it was not okay to go in a church and to be naked, but they don't see kind of the idea that was behind. So my question would be the following: why do you think shocking people maybe like helps the cause and puts the debate on a higher level? Because I have the feeling it's just like crispy people who are like, oh, I hate them, but it doesn't really like create a high debate on the cause.
As you might notice, we address the question that aren't put on the level of high debates. We address the questions that are not discussed. We highlight the events like Seulement Musulman that nobody was talking about it in the press. Nobody. And we put it up. So people were like, oh, what is this going on in France? What about city mayor? Why they didn't forbid it? And all and all and all. So here is the point that we, again, as I told you, we take the mission to take something that is uncomfortable for people to discuss, that they didn't discuss, that is not on high debate, that is not debated, in I don't know, in all newspapers everywhere. We do address the questions that people feel uncomfortable to debate, if you want to force them to debate. And this irritation that some people have towards us is in fact an irritation of the question that we address. The person who is a believer, or I don't know, the person who wouldn't like this kind of protest would be irritated by the fact that Femens went in the protest because they know that the Femens are the topless feminists and they were inside the church, and this is something that as a priori is not something I want to, is not something that's the person would like to understand. There are many people who understand it as well, who have a completely different points of view, who have a completely different opinion on some particular questions. Other people who don't agree with the opinions that we address, they will of course expose the irritation on us, but they wouldn't be irritated by us if they wouldn't be irritated by our messages. So I do believe they're irritated by our messages, and then they expose the irritation on us. Like, for example, I told you that in Ukraine, like there was a group of part of the society who were they were saying those are the prostitutes, because they didn't like our opinion against prostitution. Because this is something that have been always a part of society, and for people it became very normal in Ukraine. They called us prostitutes. That was the nickname of Femens in Ukraine, prostitutes. Why? Because we oppose prostitution, and so the irritation is towards our messages, and then towards us. And again, if our messages wouldn't be noticed, first of all, probably we wouldn't be discussing here for already 1.5 hours something. Second of all, our protest wouldn't be probably in the news in the time when there are political news. And third of all, we would be just ignored. You wouldn't know what famine is. There is nothing special in naked women. They're everywhere. But naked women saying something, there is something in it. And if the society wouldn't notice that those naked women, famine, are saying something, we wouldn't be noticed as well. Nobody would talk of famine. So the irritation that you observe is the irritation towards the messages, not towards naked women. I think I have to go.
Yeah.
It's the last question, huh? No?
Yes, a little last question.
Okay.
Yes, the last one.
And I have a question. Earlier you said it was women's turn to take a stand. And do you think part of feminism is for women to revenge against centuries of patriarchy? Because for me, I think that this political feminism is for only two women, but equality. So I would like to have your opinion about this idea of women's turn.
I did say, and I did clearly quote it even from our manifesto, Feminine Ideology, we seek emancipation of men and women from these gender classifications. We are dreaming of a society of total equality where your gender, your sexuality, as I said, nationality, ethnicity would not matter. Just to be a human being is already enough to be equal to anyone else around. Why I said it's women's turn? Because we do want to reach the equality in society. And if we look today on the society as on the image or as a diagram, we will see that men are here and women are like here. And to reach the equality, it's women's turn. It's women who have to have more today. I'm sorry, men, but you have to give women more today because you have more today. And to reach the equality, it's women's turn to go up today, to reach this equal level and to be equal at all rights, all possibilities, and all opportunities. We do not, our feminism, by definition, I don't believe in different feminisms, really, I don't. I believe in one feminism that has one idea, but maybe different forms. One feminism that is promoting equality of society, where women should get more rights to reach the equality today, to reach the total equality. And I wish us all that. Thank you very much. I have to go.